Well, today, hold on. Well, good morning. It's February 16th, and today you have just me, and I could not get on here today with the news that I have for you today. So, you guys know the reason to do this is so that those of you that don't actually hear this and the ones that like to hear me talk, because I do talk a lot, but I talk sense and I don't talk fake news. I don't talk a hoax. So the title of the show today is Russian diplomats are now, meaning Russia itself, is issuing major warnings, dire warnings that war with the U.S. is close. And this is what I've been talking to you about now. I mean, I keep waking up thinking that one day I'm going to start hearing air sirens in the outside of my home or business, and it's going to be shelter in place or it's a lot that's happening right now. And let me just share with you. There was something that came out from Zero Hedge this morning, and it said that the Kremlin's top diplomat has warned that Western involvement in Ukraine now is nearing to the point of no return. And they're accusing the United States and the NATO bloc of attempting to actually transform the country into a Russia-phobic military stronghold. Meanwhile, you have Moscow's United Nations envoy, which has declared that all of Russia's red lines have now already been crossed. And addressing lawmakers at Russia's State Duma on Wednesday, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov outlined the causes of the current conflict in Ukraine and the deterioration of the United States-Russia relations, saying that Washington has a maniacal, just crazy desire to revive the neo-colonial unipopular world order. In other words, they're saying that Washington is out to set and reset and do it with this new world order. And this is something that either you've been reading about or that we've been talking about, or you've been listening to about the Great Reset and this new world order. And an integral part of this policy is the long-term containment of Russia, including through the expansion of NATO toward our borders, as well as the transformation of fraternal Ukrainian into a Russia-phobic military stronghold. Anyway, he said in recent years, this line of Washington and its European satellites has reached now the point of no return. And after the fall of the Soviet Union, Washington and several other Western states now have gave assurance to Moscow that the NATO alliance would not expand beyond Germany. However, in the years since, President Bill Clinton and George W. Bush and Barack Obama and Donald Trump, they have each allowed new members to join the alliance, all of them inching closer to the borders of Russians' borders. And starting in 2008, NATO has repeatedly declared its intentions to someday allow Ukraine to become a member. And again, reiterating the pledge at a recent alliance summit that they just held. And the move would actually cross the brightest of all red lines for Moscow, as I previously stated, by the State Department official and current CIA director William Burns, who penned a 2008 memo warning of the geopolitical perils of extending membership to Kyiv. And still, President Joe Biden has refused to change course, insisting it's up to Ukraine whether it would like to join the U.S.-led military bloc while effectively making Kyiv a de facto member in the meantime. So in an interview with Newsweek on Tuesday, Russia's United Envoy Dmitry Polonsky argued that the West was not or has not respected Moscow's core security concerns and has become directly involved in the conflict in Ukraine. And here's what he says. He says all the red lines have already been crossed by Western countries. All the red lines have already been crossed by Western countries. Think about that for a minute. There is already semi-direct involvement of NATO in the conflict because it's not only weaponry, but it's intelligence, he said. And it's the situation when the targets of certain artillery systems, in particular HIMARS, which are HIMARS, these targets can be hit only with the coordination with Washington. So somebody's got to be involved in the intelligence part of it, is what he's saying. And last week, the Washington Post actually reported that Ukraine relies on American intelligence for selecting these targets. And since the start of the year, the White House has authorized the shipment of main battle tanks and long-range rockets to Kyiv. And additionally, NATO appears to be preparing to send Western-made warplanes to Ukraine. So it means that NATO is not only providing weapons, but also choosing the targets for Ukrainian strikes. And he goes on and he continues, he says, he went on to allege that the citizens from NATO countries are already fighting, as well as getting captured and killed in Ukraine. And we know this, he says, from the people that we capture and from the bodies that we see on the battlefield. And the ambassador said that Western weapons would only escalate the conflict, even warning that foreign intervention could eventually trigger a nuclear war. And so it's absolutely clear that any deliveries of weapons to the zone of conflict, of course, is like pouring oil into the fire. And that's exactly his words, adding that if you're dealing with a nuclear power, and if you're citing the goal of inflicting defeat to this nuclear power, you should have all the options in mind of our possible response. Those are some heavy words. And in their remarks, both diplomats also pointed out to potential American involvement in the destruction of the Nord Stream pipelines. And last week, investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, as I told you the other day when he did it, published a bombshell report claiming that Washington planned to bomb the pipelines. Well, now there's an ex-CIA saying the same thing. And the White House has denied it, that they had any part of sabotaging the line, though Senator Mike Lee later acknowledged that it was possible. And on Wednesday, I can't even say his name, I can't say these Russian names, but this diplomat said that Moscow requested a United Nations meeting next week to address Hersh's reporting, and Lavrov rejected denials from the Biden administration, saying that the West is lying, hiding the truth about the terrorist attacks on the Nord Stream and the Nord Stream 2 gas pipelines, just as they lied about the Minsk agreement. And former Germany Chancellor Angela Merkel chimed in and claimed that the Minsk agreement, which was meant to end the civil war in Ukraine, was really intended to give Kyiv time to build up its military. This is what Merkel said. And in a December 1st interview with Der Spiegel, Merkel said that she believes that during the Minsk talks that she was able to buy the time that Ukraine needed to better fend off a Russian attack. So, you know, at this point, like the title says, it's looking more and more like we could wake up one morning and find ourselves at war with Russia. And I just pray to our God, to Heavenly Father, that does not happen, that we don't wake up and find that. And on the other side of the front, there's some really good news, not so much good news for the fiat currency as we've been talking about it, but it's good news for actually gold. And if you've never heard of him, look him up, billionaire, and I didn't say millionaire, I said billionaire, John Paulson is now stating that you need gold, not dollars. And let me share this with you, because he thinks that the dollar is set up for a long-term depreciation as the world drifts towards de-dollarization. Remember, I talked about that last year, talking about how our so-called allies and others, they have already envisioned and implemented a way to get out from underneath the dollar's dominance. Well, Paulson talked about the de-dollarization trend in an interview with a journalist. And Paulson said that the trend is toward de-dollarization, but it will take a while to happen. While the U.S. isn't the economic powerhouse it once was, it remains dominant in terms of reserves and trade, but other countries, particularly China, have undercut America's economic power, and that is eroding the power of the once mighty greenback. And other countries do not want to rely on the dollar as much as they have in the past. Imagine that. I've been saying this now for a while. And the U.S. also has an enormous deficit with the rest of the world in terms of trade and investment balances that used to be very positive. But now it's the opposite. It's very negative. And the point to the intermediate and long-term depreciation of the dollar versus other currencies. And he also noted that the extraordinary amount of money printing by the Federal Reserve has also undercut faith in the U.S. dollar. And here's what he said. A lot of our growth has been based on the physical spending that has been financed by the Fed buying the debt of the governments. And the Fed's balance sheet has exploded due to quantitative easing, a polite way of saying money printing, and inflation resulted. And if you had dollars and 9% inflation, this year you lost 9% of your money. And interest rates were nowhere close to compensating for that loss. And with this backdrop, a lot of investors and central bankers are now looking for an alternative to the dollar. And as a result, Paulson said, gold is rising again. And I say again because it's been the reserve currency of the world for thousands of years. Let me repeat that. It's been the reserve currency of the world for 1,000 of years. A legitimate alternative to holding the dollar or other paper currencies. And there has been a significant increase in demand from central banks to replace dollars with gold. And we're just at the beginning of that trend. And gold will go up and the dollar will go down. So you'd be better off keeping your investment reserves in gold at this point. And Paulson isn't merely speculating. He's stating what is happening. But why gold and not some other currencies such as the Swiss, the franc, or the euro? And the other currencies will likely rise in value against the dollar, but each has their own issues as well. And the European Central Bank, the ECB, has also printed a significant amount of money. And if you keep your money in fiat currencies, you face the risk. You hear me say a lot of times, risky fiat currency. Well, this is exactly what Paulson is talking about. So due to the geopolitical events that your reserve can be actually seized. And as the central banks did with Russia, China probably think that as they have so much of their reserve in dollars, if they get into a geopolitical spat with the Western world over Taiwan or something else, that there is a possibility that these reserves will be frozen like they did with Russia. So you avoid the counterparty risk when you actually buy gold. And if you possess physical gold, you don't face that risk. This is why I'm actually in this industry. This is why I'm in this business. It's not to get rich quick. No, this is a way for not only for myself as a defensive measure to protect what I've got, but to show other people how they too can go ahead and protect what they've got. And there's many ways that you can actually purchase gold through either fiat currency, or you can actually do it even through your retirement account. So if you want to know, give me a call and I'll give you some information. It's 323-380-5485 or 800-753-8534. But you also have the potential for appreciation. And we're right now at the beginning of the trends that are going to increase the demand for gold, and inflation and geopolitical tensions will determine the rate of which gold increases. And this year, gold will appreciate versus the dollar, and also over a 3, 5, and 10-year basis is what we're looking at. So I wanted to share this with you because this Paulson, I mean, you know more than he does. He's a billionaire. So he's doing things right, right? And don't get fooled by the crypto scheme. Remember, that's a big old Ponzi scheme. It's not real. It's just digital air. And if digital air can be worth thousands of dollars, then what can something real become worth? That's the question, right? So listen, I just wanted to jump on this morning and share some of the news with you. There's a lot out there every day. It seems like we're always hearing bad instead of good. Either somebody's getting shot up in a mall or a school or you name it. You know, I do want to mention one thing about this Lori Lightfoot up in Chicago, Illinois. Have you ever flown into Chicago O'Hare Airport? It's a beautiful airport, but not anymore. Now you walk in, there's homeless people, drugged out, laying in on the ground inside the airport, inside O'Hara. They're in the subways, passed out. It's almost like, you ever watch Batman or The Lost, any of these things? It's almost like you're watching a series, and it just keeps on going and going and going. But now you become a part of that series. We become a part of that series. It's no longer television, it's reality. It's real. It's real. You walk out on the street, there's a tent popped up, there's needles on the ground. People are just all strung out all over the place. Drugs are being pumped in across the border, fentanyl. You got the tranquilizers. It's coming from China. You got balloons flying in the air, shooting them out with missiles out of freaking fighter jets. Wow. Bugs coming in on produce from Mexico. Our country is not safe anymore, people. And it was just a couple years ago. Sure, we had the pandemic, or the man-made pandemic, whatever you want to call it, this pandemic. Now there's another one, I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. There's now a new one in Africa. It starts in Africa. Remember, it always starts somewhere else, and then it ends up here. But there's a new one that just started in Africa, and literally blood is coming out of your eyes now, and you die within 10 days once you get this disease. Like man-made shit. I'm tired of it, I'll be honest with you. It's like they're trying to take us all out. Anyway, I really appreciate you listening to me today. I'll be on here tomorrow. I'll have some more news for you tomorrow. Give me a call if you want to just talk. 323-380-5485. I'm your friend. I'm here for you, whether you buy gold or not. But even those of you that stumble across this video that don't have the ability to actually purchase precious metals, you can. If you've got an extra few dollars laying aside, buy some silver. Have something that you know that you can fall back onto later without being destroyed by